Welcome to the Media Casters with your business besties, Corinna and Julie Loken. In every episode, you'll get behind-the-scenes access to experts who share their struggles and successes in podcasting, publishing, and presenting. So grab a pen, grab your bestie, and kick it with Corinna and Jules.
What we're going to do is we're going to laugh today, and we're going to learn a story about one of the most endearing and ingenious forefathers in broadcast media. Do you have any idea who I'm talking about, Corinna and Blizzy?
I might have a clue.
Yeah,
yes.
You do. Art Bell, our friend Art, took a simple concept of 24-hour comedy programming to make it into something so stratospheric that it's blown, I don't know if it's blown his mind, but it's blown my mind. And by 2018, 47.8% of American households were consumers of his deliciously hilarious network, Comedy Central. Today on the Media Casters, we are going to give you a little glimpse into the funny and maybe not so funny worlds of this little known cable channel, Comedy Central. Of course, I'm trying to be funny, and I think it may backfire on me today, but we'll see what happens. Art is the author of Constant Comedy, How I Started Comedy Central and Lost My Sense of Humor. An amazing book. I recommend everyone go out and buy it today. And by all accounts, I think he's a really nice guy. We had a little chance to just chat with him before we started recording. We're super excited. Art is the purveyor of all things funny, featuring shows such as Reno 911, The Daily Show, and the infamous animated cartoon South Park. So, Corinna, this is going to be a big show. I'm so happy that we have our guy, Art Bell, here. Let's kick it.
Art, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Great to be here.
So, Art, there's a rabbi, a priest, and a monk, and they walk into a bar. Can you
want me to finish the joke or what?
Finish it for me. That's it. That's all I got.
He's got to make it funny. That's the goal,
funny,
right?
not so funny.
A rabbi, a priest, and No, I'm not going to finish it. I do know a finish to that joke, but it's really not broadcast worthy. So we'll skip it.
We've had a lot of salty stuff on this little podcast of ours, so.
Well, no.
Shoot your shot.
I demur.
So you're an author. I mean, you have such a rich history going back to 87. I don't even know. When did you start working at HBO and how did this all evolve?
I started working at HBO in 1985. And I went there as a financial analyst, which is about the last thing I wanted to do in the television business. But that was my foot in the door. Yeah, it was my way in. Yeah. And I just want to point out that in those days, HBO was kind of like the Netflix of today.
Mm-hmm,
you know, I mean, it was the coolest place in television to work because they were doing all the new stuff. You had the three networks, ABC, NBC, CBS. And then HBO was putting on movies and also uncut comedy. They, Robin Williams special, Whoopi Goldberg special. You couldn't see that stuff anywhere else on television because they were not censoring it or editing it. So HBO was really a cool place to work then.
Yeah, it became, I think, the place where I got to know George Carlin and fall in love with his work
George
too.
Carlin?
Oh,
Wow.
not personally.
Oh. I was going to jump right in.
Do you
on that.
know George Carlin? Did you know him?
I don't. He's, but I will say that George Carlin was an early, his albums were huge when I was about, I would say 13 or 14 years old. Right. And we used to listen to them over and over in my house.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you ever been starstruck? I mean, that's
starstruck. Let's see. Typically no, because after a while, you're just kind of seeing people. I'm trying to think of an occasion where I was totally bowled over by someone. I will tell you, there was one occasion. This was after comedy, and my boss called me in and he said, "Hey, come on in to my office because I want you to meet somebody." I said, "Sure." So I didn't know who it was. I walked in, and sitting on the couch was Mel Brooks.
Oh, wow.
One of the all-time great comedy guys in the whole world and one of the funniest guys. And he said, to me, he says, "Does your mother know you dress like that?" And I laughed and I said, "Yeah, I think so. She dressed me this morning." And he laughed. And I thought, Great. I got Mel Brooks to laugh. My life is complete. Anyways, that was, I wouldn't say starstruck, but that's as close as I've come to being like, wow, I'm in the same room as Mel Brooks. And he asked me for a favor too. And I gave it to him.
Well, I bet you give him just about anything at that moment, right?
From the shirt off
The
your
house,
back.
the kids, take it all. No. He asked me for a favor. This is a story I didn't tell in the book. But I'll tell it because it's a funny story, interesting story. He said, my son wants to get into the television business. And would you have lunch with him? And I said, yeah, great. So his son's like 24, 25 years old. And we have lunch and we're talking about television. And then he starts talking to me about his writing. And I said, listen, Max, his name's Max Brooks. I said, it sounds like you're a writer. I don't think you want to go into television. I think you want to write books. So the next thing I know, the guy writes a book that becomes a huge bestseller. It's the book about zombies. What was it called? Zombie Revolution or something like that. Zombie Wars, something like that. He
World
writes
War
this book.
Z. I don't think that was written by him.
World War
Really?
Zombie. Yeah, I think that's right. Anyway, he writes the biggest thing, becomes a movie, becomes everything else. And you'd think the guy would write, hey, thanks, Art. 5 years later, I'm a world class. No, never heard from him. I started him on his career. Anyway.
Max, if you're listening, you need to write a thank you note to Uncle Art.
If you're listening, we'll all be surprised, actually, but that would be nice.
So your path to working in entertainment was a little different than that of most. I mean, first, your undergrad, you said you're going to be an economist, right? Studying economics, and then going to Wharton to get your MBA, and then working finance track to HBO, and creating an opportunity for yourself there that was a little different because you saw a hole in the marketplace where comedy wasn't being served the way that HBO could have, right?
Exactly.
And so that's essentially when you came to them and said, hey, we should really have a comedy show that we're, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Let's take Dr. Demento and put it on steroids, right?
Exactly.
Do something different than had been done to date.
Right.
Now, why do you think you encountered so much resistance initially to that idea?
I think for two reasons. One, people did think it was a stupid idea. I mean, they just thought, seriously, 24 hours of comedy. And I would say, well, 24 hours of news, 24 hours of sports. And they said, no, that's all different. They'd say there's plenty of comedy on television. We're HBO. We're putting comedy on there. The second reason is it's expensive. In those days, these days you can put a television channel out of your garage if you want to, if you have a computer. And that's what TikTok and YouTube actually ended up doing. But in those days, you needed a lot of infrastructure. You needed satellite equipment. And I'm not talking I'm talking like giant satellite equipment, uplink facilities, studio facilities. You needed all this stuff. And they said it's very expensive. And given that we think it's a stupid idea, why would we take a risk like that? So yeah, that's why people didn't want to do it.
Wow. Well, I'm sure now looking back, hindsight is that 2020, right? How many different channels are there that really focus in some way on comedy at this time?
Well, not too many, but it's interesting you say that because one of the other objections was at the time, there's too many cable channels already. Now, this was 1988, 89. And there were about 20 cable channels. Things were just getting started. And of course, now we have 200 or 300 or 600 or whatever the number is. And streaming is a factor now. So things have come a long way since then.
Yeah, for certain.
How do you keep up with all those changes? I mean, everything is live streaming at this point.
Yeah. I retired. That's how I keep up.
Well,
I started writing and I thought this is much more fun. I was right when I told Max writing was fun because I became a writer and it is fun.
I love that transition of you being a financier to being a writer because I see the left brain, right brain.
I got the whole brain.
You got the full brain. Monty, if you will.
Corinna mentioned that I started in economics, and I have to say, people say, "Oh my gosh, you were an economist." I was an economist in Washington for 3 years, right out of college, and they say that must have been horrible for you. No, I liked being an economist. I thought economics was fascinating. I still do. And it was a very smart time in my life. I was very smart then, and it's been downhill pretty much since then.
I
But
was going to say, as opposed to now.
you know what? I think people are at their smartest and most creative. Well, I won't say most creative, but I think people are really kind of at the top of their game in their 20s and early 30s. And that's where I was, working with really smart people. And it didn't occur to me until sort of the end of that 3 years working as an economist, that maybe I should do something different, because I was facing grad school in economics and becoming a professor. And I didn't think that was the life for me. So I changed it up, went to business school.
Yeah, and business school for finance to then work in the world
Finance.
of
And finance is not funny to me, actually. It's very
There's nothing funny about finance.
depressing.
It is a little depressing. Less interesting, I think, to me anyway, than economics. But, I went there, and I wish somebody had told me this, but I went there thinking that, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go get my degree, my MBA, and then I will get a job in television. Piece of cake, right? Turns out that you don't, even in those days especially, you don't really need an MBA to work in television. As a matter of fact, that wasn't really a great calling card for me when I got out. And I had a tough time getting a job out of business school. Listen, most of my friends in business school were going to Wall Street and consulting firms. And, that's where they wanted, consulting firms. I had worked in one. And so they came to me and said, come on, work with us. And I said, no, I'm going to the entertainment business. So I did finally get a job at CBS in finance for about half the money I'd been making as an economist in Washington, D.C. And I remember my father calling me and said, now, how's this working out? You're taking a job that's paying you a lot less, and you just spent 2 years and lots of money in grad school. I said, Dad, trust me. This is what I want to do. This is where I want to be. And that's how it's working out. So,
well, it's where your passion was. I mean, I loved reading the first section of your book where you even talk about while you were at Wharton, what do they call them? The Follies?
The Wharton Follies. What I did was I walked into Wharton and I said, hey, where, I want to get into television entertainment. Where do the people like me at Wharton hang out, thinking there was a club or something? And they said, well, interesting. There's not a lot of those people, but they put on the Wharton Follies every year. I went to a meeting with the Wharton Follies guys, and I found that they were like professionals from Broadway, professional musicians who wanted to get out of that business and get to Wall Street, But there we were, a bunch of people who, wanted to put on a show. And that's what I did for 2 years. And the second year I wrote the show, and it reminded me how much I loved writing comedy. I'd done some comedy writing in college, and there I was writing comedy. And that's when I thought, man, I'd really love to work at a comedy channel, but there isn't one. So that's how that got started.
So you just pitched it to HBO.
Well, it's not as simple as that. I spent a couple of years doing my job because I figured, all right, look, I'm going to get to HBO. They don't know me. They wanted me to do econometric forecasting, if you can believe that. And I did that for them. But
what kind of forecasting?
Econometrics.
Oh, okay.
It's mathematical economics, which I happen to know something about because that's what I was doing in Washington. Anyway, I figured if I did a really great job there, then in the forecasting, then they would consider me for other stuff. And that was my whole plan. And that's pretty much what happened. I got transferred to an area called New Business Development. And they were trying to develop other pay television channels there. Actually, just one. They were trying to develop a channel called Festival, which was supposed to be like HBO, but no sex, violence, or bad language, because they found out that some people weren't taking HBO because they thought it was had too much sex, violence, and bad language. So they put together Festival, which had no sex, violence, or bad language. And the first day I walked into my new job and I said, now, how are we going to sell this by saying it doesn't have this stuff? Isn't this what entertainment usually sells itself by saying they do have it? And everyone said, shh, don't say that.
They wanted to create the Hallmark Channel or something more like it.
Hallmark
essentially,
or Lifetime.
But it was a pay channel. Lifetime was not like that, actually. But you know what was the big competition? And that was my first lesson in competition. we were putting together this festival thing and we were testing it, and it had, stuff for grown-ups, we said, television for grown-ups. Disney, which was showing kids movies, said, hey, we could show some grown-up movies that kids and grown-ups like, and we can basically take festival right out of the picture. And that's what they did.
Yeah, I mean, I recently did a MBA project. I finished my MBA
Oh,
last June.
congratulations.
And so when I read your section on, covering finance, I'm like, well, these were my least favorite classes. So you spent your time diving right into the stuff that I didn't love quite as much. At any rate, we did this analysis on what we called the streaming wars, specifically HBO, AT&T, Time Warner, and thinking also about things like Disney and who's pricing their product where. And I have to say, value for dollar spent, Disney is slam dunking it still today. I mean, they've got the whole Star Wars franchise now. They have, of course, all the Marvel comics related movies, and also, of course, the Disney arsenal, which is quite vast, deep, and broad, right? And so they're charging, what, $6 a month for this service that everybody else is charging in the realm of 15 and 20. It's pretty incredible what they've been able to do over the course of this last few years. And I mean, I just see them continuing to rise. So I'm just curious where you see
The
things
Disney
heading
Plus.
Well,
in this
actually,
new world.
it's an interesting thing that you point out that Disney is doing so well. And they have a huge library and they're charging less, because I think those things all go together. I am not an expert on the streaming industry. As I said,
Mhm.
I got out of the business several years ago, but from what I could see, Netflix, for example, is paying a huge amount of money. They're starting from scratch. They don't have any back catalog.
Mhm.
HBO is in a better position, but HBO has always seen itself as the premier television provider, so they're not going to go low. Disney just has all that stuff in the basement that they can play that is timeless, and that is a huge advantage. So they don't have to put as much money, for example, as Netflix has to put in to keep themselves going. And that's, I think, why they can charge a little bit less. Plus,
Mhm.
as brand names go, you can't beat Disney.
I know, it's a tough one, right? And they also own ESPN and Hulu, so it's like, what are you going to do? They've
Right.
cornered the market in a few arenas. I just wonder, there's a couple of things that you mention in your book and also in another podcast I listened to as I prepared for today's session about interfacing with celebrities and working to ensure that we come to a space of success and collaboration. So I wonder if you could just offer your perspective of what it's like to, or how even you work to collaborate with some of these A-listers and, really support their growth and ensure that they're bringing the best to you too, as a part of Comedy Central or whatever it is that you're working to do.
Well, there is one story. I don't know if you read the entire book, but there is one story I tell about working with Bill Maher from the very beginning, by the way. I think he exemplifies one kind of talent who he made himself very hard to work with.
Mm.
And I don't know if that was just the way he is or the way he wanted to be. I always wonder about that, because, like, for example, Jon Stewart, who I worked with at the very beginning of his career, we had him on at the Comedy Channel. We called it Comedy Channel before we changed the name to Comedy Central. And almost instantly, first of all, we saw he was great television. Second of all, we saw he was a very passionate and thoughtful and intelligent guy. And he brought that to whatever he was doing. And third, he was just a nice guy. He was fun to hang
Mhm.
around with. Didn't, make too much trouble, didn't throw the furniture around. As opposed to Bill Maher, who did throw the furniture around. And it was, again, it just makes it a little harder to work with people like that. Now, what happens in cases where there's extreme, where someone is extremely talented but more difficult to work with, and that happens a lot. As it was explained to me early on, and I think this is right, it's the talent at the end of the day who's getting in front of the camera. It's putting himself or herself in front of millions of people, putting their reputation on the line every minute of that time that they're on television.
Mhm.
And it's a lot of pressure. and it's a little scary. And so when the talent wants, specific things and the things done specific ways, and whether it's wardrobe or lighting or, whatever the stories you hear about talent wanting things, they have a point. And I've always taken that to heart since it was explained to me. But we still got into a bit of a tussle over an ad campaign that we did for his show, which, on the surface, it was early on in Comedy Channel days. We had just put a show on. And I thought, man, wouldn't it be great for Bill Maher to do an ad campaign about his show, get him out there. Nobody really knew him. He wasn't that famous in those days.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't like the ad campaign. And he made it very clear to me that he didn't like the ad campaign by calling me up and telling me, I don't like the ad campaign and I'm having you fired.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a pretty bracing moment for me. And I really tried to apologize and explain why we were doing it that way. And also, looking back on it, I thought, okay, maybe I did something wrong. We showed this campaign to a lot of people, including his producers. But we didn't show it to Bill. Now, do you know why we didn't show it to Bill? Because Bill would say, go ahead, Julie.
I'm going to
I saw your
guess
hand.
that he would just dismiss it automatically.
Okay. And then we do another ad campaign, and any guesses on what would happen to that one?
He would not like it. He could have
basically,
done
Something's
better.
always wrong. Something
Yes.
is always wrong.
So what I was faced with, and I did check with some people on this, what I was faced with was making Bill Maher the head of marketing for Comedy Central.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, that's not such a great idea because we have to get something out the door. You have to keep moving when you're making television. Anyway, I did try and explain that to him, trying to apologize to him, but he was not having any of it. And he did try and get me fired, but of course, well, maybe I shouldn't say of course. As it happened, I did not get fired.
You had a benevolent boss.
Well, it was just a non-starter. I mean,
Yeah.
the talent says, fire this guy. They said, no, we're not firing this guy. Anyway, and that was kind of the worst I've seen in my career. I worked with talent. As I said, I worked with Jon Stewart at the other end of the spectrum. And we had, and lots of people we had great collaborations with. I can go through the list and say, this guy was hard, this guy was difficult, this guy was easy. It's like anything else. It's like executives. Some of them are easy to work with and some of them are, narcissistic psychopaths.
You have to have a say in every single thing that happens underneath them, right?
Gosh,
So there's that.
there's no shortage of them in the entertainment industry either. So I had to work with them. So if you're in the business, you're getting it sometimes from both sides.
How would you describe yourself as an executive?
Not a narcissistic psychopath.
Okay.
I am
That
not
was the
in
right
that group.
answer.
You know what? I came out of economics and then I went to business school. And Corinna, you know this if you studied in business school. They put some emphasis on organization and structure and management skills
Mhm.
and things like that. When I got to the entertainment business, I saw that there was less emphasis on organization and management skills. And it was mostly because, and I say this without any malice, there's a guy or a gal at the top who, as Julie said, wants to do, think they can call the shots on everything. There is one anecdote I'll tell you that was not in the book where the head of HBO, the chairman, and I were talking. And believe me, that was always a fraught experience for me because he was a very powerful man. And I
The
was
most powerful person in Hollywood,
the
right?
most powerful
At the
guy in
time.
Hollywood, according to the
Mhm.
New York Times at the time. And I was the least, according to everybody. And and so I was talking to him about something about management and structure. And he said, Art, you don't have to worry about that because I am managing the Comedy Channel. And I said to myself, no, you're not. You're managing HBO, which is this giant, successful, monolithic company that needs a lot of attention all the time. And
Mhm.
we are a startup on the side, and we need good managers and good people and good structure and all the stuff, all that. And so we had to work around that, we had to work around that. And it was hard.
Wow. Well, I have a curious question.
Go ahead.
And
Because
and
you're
that is-
curious, Corinna.
we always come back to this. But I've heard over the years about some very strange, weird asks by people working in Hollywood. It's almost as if they have to have a weird ask in order to be taken seriously. What is the weirdest ask you've ever had? And you don't have to tell who. I'm just curious.
Oh, I like that question. I'm curious too.
Well, this happened after I was at Comedy Central. I became president of Court TV. And I don't know if you may not remember that whole experience, but it was courtroom trials, live courtroom trials in the daytime. And then we put mysteries and crime dramas on at night. At 5:00, we had Nancy Grace going on doing a live show. I think she's still doing shows, but I would say 2 or 3 times a week, I would be called up. Now I was the boss, but they would call me up and say, it's 20 minutes to 5. Nancy says she's not going on. Now, I don't know if you consider that a weird ask, but I had to go up there and I had to say, okay, Nancy, what's up? She goes, the director wants to do this and I don't want to do that. And I said, well, what does the director want to do? And she'd explain. And then the director would come over and we'd have a conversation. And somehow I'd work it out, usually by telling the director, we're going to do it Nancy's way. So she gets on the air at 5:00. And that's, it was like that.
Yeah, she was throwing their weight around.
That's a lot of power she had.
I'll tell you something. You're doing live television, which is the most fun you can have in television.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Crazy.
Look at your smile on your face when you said that. Look at that smile.
I told some stories in the book about live television. Anything can happen and probably will. I mean, one of our big successes at Comedy Central, this was in 1992, is we covered the State of the Union address live. And we had comedians commenting on the State of the Union address as the president was talking. Now, it was a very audacious stunt. And I tell the whole story about, how it was hard for us to put together. And we got Al Franken. Do you remember Al Franken?
Yes.
He was on Saturday Night
Senator
Live.
Franken.
Senator Franken, who is no longer Senator Franken. We can get into that after the show. But he was going to do, we got him and we were very proud of that. He was a big name and he did live television. So we said, perfect. He knows live television. So we're at rehearsal before, and they did a lot of rehearsal that week because they didn't know how they were going to do this. Right. So we were at rehearsal and it was about an hour until the president's State of the Union address. So the director, his name was Billy Kimball. He says, okay, everybody get ready. We got an hour before we go live. And Al looks up and he says, what do you mean before we go live? We're doing this live? I thought this was live to tape. I'm not doing this live. And he walked out.
Oh, Mr.
Of course,
Franken.
That's right. That was.
Did you ask Nancy Grace to fill his place?
I didn't know Nancy at the time, nor would I have asked her. But anyway, we all stood there with stunned looks on our face, as you can imagine. And luckily, we had a brilliant talent vice president. Her name was Lori Zacks, and she became a very famous producer in Hollywood. She ran after him. I don't know what she said to him or how she did it, but she got him back in the room, and he said, okay. And he put on a great show, really funny, really good.
Yeah.
And we got great reviews. And I think that was one of the things that put Comedy Central on the map early on, because that's when the press kind of looked up and said, hey, these guys at Comedy Central, they got something going over there. They're doing some stuff you can't do anywhere else. That's cool.
Yeah.
It was cutting edge. I mean, in my opinion, it really was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, speaking of live TV, if you watched the Oscars last night, there was quite a moment that I think none of us can kind of fathom even just happened.
That was bananas. That was bananas.
Right. Like, I don't typically watch the Oscars, and I happened to turn it on live and see something I never expected, which was Chris Rock getting smacked for, I don't know,
would you
touching on something sensitive.
I mean, would you protect your wife's honor like that? Or would your husband do that?
Not in front of a live worldwide television audience.
I really thought it was planned.
I think I might get into it at the after party, but I don't think, or I might.
A little bit of an overreaction.
I might have a bad look on my face when the camera showed up. And listen, we're not the first ones to parse this. We're not going to be the last ones. This will be, and I just read, by the way, before we got on, that the Academy is opening a formal, I'm sorry to laugh, a formal investigation.
Well, it's
into
funny now.
What happened.
You make everything funny.
What are they going to find out? What are they looking for? What?
I mean, we all
And they do
witnessed
not
what happened,
What
condone.
right?
is this like? Is this like the January 6th committee? I mean, what are they going to do? Call testimony from witnesses?
That would be
I'm sorry.
interesting,
To me,
though. Like
that's
the
comedy.
people.
That's
That
comedy.
is-
The Academy's opening. Yeah, we're going to look into this and see what really happened. I think we saw what really happened.
That is funny.
Wow.
Yeah, I
But
think
the
that
list
was,
of witnesses would
yeah,
be
right.
stellar. Stellar.
Right.
And the cameras from every which angle.
We're sending out 1 billion subpoenas. We're gonna
And
see
Right.
we
who
do
shows
not
up.
condone violence here on the media casters.
Oh
nor
my
does
gosh.
The Academy.
See, that was funny too, because the Academy issued that statement almost
That-
directly on the heels.
They do
Now-
not condone violence.
I do not know Chris Rock personally. I never worked with him. But
He's
Nancy
stirring the
Geller,
pot a little bit.
Nancy Geller, who was very instrumental in putting Comedy Channel and Comedy Central together. She worked with him extensively throughout the 90s and beyond, and they are close friends. I haven't talked to her about what she thinks, but she loves Chris Rock. She says he is the greatest guy in the world. He's the nicest guy in the world.
Mhm.
And I don't know if it was out of listen, okay, let's go through the list of jokes that have killed careers. And there have been, there have been jokes that have killed careers. But Gilbert Gottfried told a joke and that got him kicked off the Aflac account and all that kind of stuff. And he famously almost told a 9/11 joke 2 weeks after 9/11 to a crowd of comedians at I'm laughing because it's not funny, at one of the Comedy Central roasts, which I just happened to be at, where they were roasting Hugh Hefner.
Mm.
And I don't know if you meant to bring this up, but comedians and comedy writers, their job is to walk up to the line and step over the line once in a while and then step back. And that is what makes live comedy especially as exciting as it is, because you get to see the world through their eyes and you get to hear them say things that you wouldn't think they should say.
Yeah. They step over and just enough
Right.
get your ire raised, but
Right.
not
So I'll
to the
tell you
point
that-
of being angry.
The quick story about Gilbert Gottfried is we were at this roast and the place was packed with comedy people and big executives 2 weeks after 9/11. And Gilbert gets up there and he says, this thing with 9/11. And everybody went, no, too soon. You saw 500 people put their arms up in the air saying, don't do this. Whatever the joke is,
It's
don't
not
tell it.
Yeah.
And he switched gears like that and got out of it and told a very famous joke, which became a very famous telling of the joke, called the Aristocrats, which is a joke that comedians tell each other to make each other laugh. And he told it, and it was extremely funny. Everybody was on the floor laughing. It was interesting, thinking back on it. He really set the room up by going into that 9/11 thing. Because how much more uncomfortable can you make a room than that?
Right.
Everybody was like cringing.
Nothing funny, even now, about 9/11.
Exactly. Anything he
Mhm.
said after that was going to be brilliant. And it was. So good.
Well,
you know,
thinking to South Park and its involvement on Comedy Central, I feel like
Transition to South Park now.
they did
sir.
a really, really good job of
Mhm.
making fun of certain aspects of what our culture did around 9/11. Like, I remember an entire montage where it was just Rudy Giuliani getting on stage and saying 9/11, and then the whole crowd, roaring with whatever. And I felt like, okay, they're touching on the wire here, and they were doing that relatively early by reference to when 9/11 occurred. So again, just pushing boundaries and really seeing what could be done.
South Park gets into the realm of satire, and also true confessions. I left shortly after South Park came on the air, so I was not, part of the.
You're not claiming
ascendance of-
South Park?
I was there when it came in, and was part of the group that laughed like crazy, and said, "If we get this on the air, it'll be terrific, but it'll also be dangerous." Anyway,
Mhm.
but what they do is they do satire. And they do it
Mhm.
very well. And satire through the years, starting with Jonathan Swift, A Modest Proposal, where he suggested that in order to beat the famine, people eat their children, which was notably outrageous at the time. satire gets outrageous, and maybe there's a little more latitude for something that's considered satirical. But anyway, now we're getting into the finer points. I think that what the South Park guys do and what they've done in all their endeavors is brilliant. I mean, it's just, talent like that comes along once in a generation. Very impressive.
Is there anything that you've said no to? We can't cross that line, or are you open to all things?
Okay, so here's the thing. I mean, this came up recently. It comes up all the time now because of the so-called woke audience, where people are going to get up and walk out before the comedian tells the joke, or people will not watch the movie if they don't like the direction it's going in. And man, that is very hard on comedians and comedy writers, because as we said before, they, their whole job is to push the boundaries. And you mentioned, Corinna, before we got on the podcast here, that you saw some of the podcasts that I did with my friend Vinny Favale, and we interviewed some comedians from the 90s who were working and are working now about this, and they're scared to death. They are scared to death. I mean, Jerry Seinfeld famously said, "I'm not going to work colleges anymore because the audience takes offense at my act." And I'm thinking, man, Jerry Seinfeld, he's the least offensive comedian I can think of. And so that's a problem. And I hope it swings back. I do hope it swings back.
It's a different generation, Art. Seriously.
It is, but you know what? Let's think about all the great things that the outrageous comics in the 90s did. And I'm thinking of women comics, Sarah Silverman, right? I mean, they were really kind of talking about what it was like to be a woman in the 1990s in America. And what a great way to get that point across to men who otherwise wouldn't be listening to any of this, right? I thought it was just, if you look at the sum total of their acts and their however else they were communicating, they were doing the world a service by saying, look, this is what it's like, and this is how we feel, and get used to it, So comedy inadvertently serves that purpose. And if you say you can't do that anymore, what'd you just do? What did you just do? Anyway.
So what do you think it's going to take in this era to be successful as a new comic or as someone who's trying to break free?
Listen, and now we're on a slightly different topic because, there's been over the years, lots of comics who don't touch on anything that's at the least bit controversial. Although things that weren't considered controversial then, I mean, all the Borscht Belt comics did Jewish comedy and Italian comedy and Puerto Rican. I mean, they were just, that was their shtick, that we are, a minority and there's other minorities and we're going to talk about all the other minorities. You can't do that anymore. So in those days, it was very acceptable. And these days, not so much. But what it takes to be a great comedian or a great comedy writer is a lot of work. It's the same thing it takes to be a great anything. It takes a lot of work and a lot of practice. For a comedian to get a good 5 minutes, a good solid 5 minutes to go on to do showcases takes, months and months of writing and rewriting and thinking and trying and all that stuff. Listen, most of the comedians, I will say, but, if you go into the comedy business, you're considered funny and you consider yourself funny. So that's not the issue. The issue is, can you make it work? Can you do it on command? And can you relate to an audience?
Yeah.
How do you, what was that je ne sais quoi or something special that you saw in comedians that you just had to have them? Can you articulate that? Is there something,
again,
or something they should not be doing?
See, now you're making an interesting leap.
Je ne sais quoi, my French.
No, that
Corinna.
wasn't a leap. I speak that much French.
That's something special.
6 years of French, junior high and high school.
Wow.
But I was not the talent coordinator. I was not the talent person. I mean, I worked with the talent people, and when we made decisions like the one I talked about on Al Franken or Bill Maher, I worked with Bill Maher and Jon Stewart. But we had people going to clubs every night who way past my bedtime. even then, looking at new talent. So it would be a better question for them. But I will say that, again, I mentioned Jon Stewart. There are certain people who I thought were extremely funny and could make me laugh no matter what they were doing or saying. And those are the ones that I kind of picked off as the ones who would be successful. When I saw Jon Stewart, I said, man, this guy's great television and he's going to be brilliantly successful. And I was right.
Yeah. Well, good bet on that one. I've loved a lot of what he's done, and just
Well,
so impressed.
The Daily Show reshaped news in America for
Well,
a
it was where I got
long
my news
time.
for a while.
Yeah, right. And
I mean, that's a reality for a lot of people.
right. And that is a very impressive feat. Not since Walter Cronkite, I would say, has somebody really kind of wrestled the news to the ground the way Jon did.
Hmm. Wow. Well, Art, I want to finish your reading your book and then invite you back to ask you more
yes.
questions.
Definitely. The book is a memoir. I will mention that. You didn't mention that. And as a memoir, it's a real personal kind of telling of the story.
It's all your opinion for legalities, right?
It's my opinion, but it's not only my opinion. It's kind of how I felt at the time, whether it was good, bad, or sad, or happy, or laughing or not laughing. And it's quite a story. And I'm glad I told it. I told it.
Well, I'm just speaking from the heart here when I say, just page turner from page one. I just wasn't able to complete it before this particular interview. And I mean, I'm just looking forward to having the opportunity to finish it because it's an incredible read. You did a very good job of putting us right in your shoes. And I feel like I'm learning something from that as I contemplate writing my own book that is kind of in ideation phase at the present time. So thank you for your work. It's incredible.
And I have it on Audible as well.
It's on Audible. It's
not paperback yet.
Paperback's coming out according to my publisher in December. Why December? I don't know, but that's his choice.
Time for Christmas, man. It's a
good
good season to release a paperback.
Right.
Yep.
We'll have you back before the holidays. But funniest thing that's ever happened to you in your whole entire life.
The most outrageous thing that ever happened to me is a story I tell in the book, is when Dennis Miller was doing the State of the Union address live. And I was sitting there watching from the green room or whatever. And the speech went long and Dennis had to go to the bathroom.
That is funny. What does
gets
one
better.
do?
He kept his mic on?
He kept his mic on, walked off stage.
Did I hear this?
Didn't know where the bathroom was, but there was a garbage can there. And so he went to the bathroom in the garbage can in the hall outside. And while we were, we're out there, actually, Lori Zacks, who is the talent person, she said, uh-oh. And I said, what? And she goes, I think we got a big problem here. And we ran out and there he was. And he finished and he went back in and he completed the broadcast. Terrific live. But the funny part is he came running out and he said, oh my God, I killed my career. I killed it. It's dead. And of course he didn't, but he thought he did. And he ran down the hall and around the corner to where there was a men's bathroom. And he went into the men's bathroom. And I went down there with Lori and I said, okay, Lori, you're going to have to go into the bathroom and talk the guy off the ledge. She goes, no, I draw the line there. I don't go into a men's bathroom for anyone. I said, all right, I'll go into the men's bathroom and talk him off the ledge. And that's what I did. I went
so then you were a talent manager. You said you've never been one, but you were that day.
You know what? When you're in television, you get called on to do everything short of going on the air, which I would have probably run the other way. But you get called on to do everything. It's fun. That's why television's fun.
Wow.
What an amazing tenure. What an amazing just life you've led.
Yeah, it's been, I look back, it's been a great career and I'm very happy to be writing now. Corinna, you're going to like it. It's a lot. If you end up liking it, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, and the current world of comedy, some of my favorite shows are It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I don't think I'll ever get over that one. I had the pleasure of meeting the cast, aside from Danny DeVito. He wasn't there at Sundance one year. And just great cast, great people, really funny, innovative shows. and, on FX, not Comedy Central, right? But they're just doing incredible stuff. And I like to see that. I like to see the irreverence and the fact that they're continuing to be brave in this current, what do you want to call it, this climate today. So my hope is that we'll see more innovative comedy coming out that will push the envelope without fear and that will be entertained for the next few decades. Some of these people are coming out of the work that you initially got started. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So besides being on our podcast, what else are you doing for fun these days?
Fun? Let's see. I play the piano. I play jazz piano. I'm taking lessons. Wow. Yeah. I've done that since I played piano since I was a kid. And I'm playing jazz drums because I played for about 10 years. I used to listen to jazz and think, what the heck is that drummer doing? I can't even figure it out. So I thought, all right, I'll try playing drums. And I took lessons, and playing jazz drums is hard, but it's really fun. So that's what I do. Drums and piano. And I'm out here in Utah, so I ski and I hike. And I used to travel, but this COVID thing's cut that down to down substantially. And we took up scuba diving, my wife and I, a few years ago. And that's as much fun as you can have. That's great.
Well, when you come out to the Monterey Bay, you can come dive with me.
Okay. So. Do you dive?
Yeah. I'll take pictures. I'll just take pictures
before we get in. Right. Yeah. Great.
Or underwater. We have underwater cameras too. Perfect. I'm heading to Kauai next week. So I'll do some warm water diving, but the cold water stuff is really where a lot of the life is.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Should we do it, Corinna?
We should do it. Yes.
Let's do it. So if you are open to it, we have all our guests at the end of each episode repeat these 2 words. Kick it.
Kick it.
Kick it.
Let's kick it.
Wait.
Kick it.
Wait, you're good at this. One more time.
Kick it.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Mediacasters. You can keep this conversation going and kick it with Corinna and Jules in live office hours each week. Visit themediacasters.mn.co to sign up. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe whenever you listen. Let's kick it.